So for anyone who might look at you and think, my word, what a big, tall, dirty hippie, they might not realise that there was a life that came before the beard, which involved you working as a government agent.
Yeah, that is true. I've worked as a government agent on more than one occasion actually, but not obviously in the Secret Service and the more public service. I spent a lot of time working in public service actually. I've worked for, police, TV companies, all the rest of it, and government as well. Yeah, I was the allowances manager for the Scottish Parliament when it first opened. Not when it very first opened, just within a year or so. And it was a great time of, there was me thinking, Scotland's got its own parliament, get a chance to serve, blah, 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 this is great. And I got a chance to work one-to-one, often on the phone, but occasionally in person, with every single elected member in the Scottish Parliament. I managed every single expense and spend that they spent for the first couple of years. There's not a single thing that was spent that I didn't get to see at some point. And I discovered so much corruption and so much scamming and all of this that I built up a portfolio that was about that thick. And went to blow the whistle on it actually. I actually went to blow the whistle when I didn't have an MP scapegoat, it was the party. So I actually had evidence that said one of the parties is corrupt. Not a scapegoat, not an individual member, the party is at it. And up until then, we'd been very empowered, and so at the Scottish Parliament, and so everything we'd identified up until then had all got dealt with, and it'd been like the person had got pulled up, or our saying no to the spend had been upheld, which Westminster didn't get, things like that. But with this particular thing, it was closed down. That was it. It was like, oh, admin error, shush, 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 blah, blah, blah. So I was having none of that. I went to blow the whistle. I felt it was my duty to blow the whistle, to be honest. And nobody would touch it. So there was me. I had evidence that showed one of the political parties was corrupt, and not a TV station or broadsheet would go near it with a barge pole. None of them. And even though I had the portfolio of evidence that proved the Labour Party was corrupt and seeking unjust and undue enrichment from public funds for party coffers, the one golden rule that public purse is not to be used on is getting stuff into the party coffers, and every party's at it. But the Labour Party were at it on a grand scale at the time.
How did that manifest itself? What did you?
What did they do? Well, see, we used to phone. We obviously just got a devolved body, so we used to phone up Westminster and say, right, we've come across this. What do you guys do? And they were like, we just let them do what they like, And basically, at the time, Westminster had not been audited properly in 300 years. The audits of Westminster and the subsequent highlighting of the expenses frauds in Westminster only arose as a result of what we did in the devolved bodies in Wales, Ireland and Scotland. And it's only because of our work, our transparency and our laying it on the line in terms of what was actually going on that even turned the lens of attention onto Westminster. So I was personally a bit peeved when all this news happened for the expenses scandal in 2006? Something like that. I was like, this is old news. I blew the whistle on this 6 years ago, and now you're only just catching up. And obviously, we're still seeing the cascading effects of that now, where people are still getting pulled up for what they're doing with the public purse. And it was endemic long before. Now, in this particular instance, it wasn't just about a member getting a plasma TV for themselves or a digital camera to stick in their back pocket. This was the party manipulating rent, and basically all the parties do this thing where they use donor pot to buy a property. They then lease that property to the MP or the MSP at quite a a reasonable sum, but they do it so that the money from the allowances is going into party coffers rather than anywhere else. So there's a way to direct it in. So yes, they did have an outlay, but they were immediately getting the money back in on it straight away, coming straight from the public purse, guaranteed every month. Westminster had no leases for any of those properties. Not a single one had a lease set up on it, because the members could do what they like. The party could change rent whenever it wanted. It could do whatever it wanted, break all sorts of conventions and rules. We were having none of that in Scotland, so we set up a proper lease system, so all the members had to have leases on their properties. In the run-up to the, I can't remember which election it was, I think it was 01, might have been the 01 elections. In the 4 months prior to it, the Labour Party sought to double and then triple the rent on all the properties within the space of a month or so. And we had it in the lease, it was a breach of lease and all the rest of it. So I phoned up Westminster to say, right, we've got a breach of lease here going on, blah, 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 this isn't happening, reissue these invoices. And Westminster were like, what do you mean you're paying those invoices? We're paying them. And basically, we're in every single situation where two members were sharing a property, so the Member of Parliament for England and the Member of Parliament for Scotland, when they were both in the same property, they were cross-billing. So the English member was telling the Scottish Parliament, it's my property, this Scottish member owes me the money. And the Scottish member was doing the same with the Scottish Parliament, saying, it's my property, the English member owes me the money. And the parties were creaming in double the money, and in fact, if there was an MEP as well, a European Parliament, they were at it too. So whenever you had the shared offices going on, the parties were creaming in triple rent, so from 3 sets of public purse, including the European public purse, but they were also, at that time, doubling and tripling the rent within the space of a month, which was clearly to get funds together for the election campaign. And I had evidence of this, that every single shared property was doing this, every single one for the Labour Party in the run-up to the elections. The party was at it big time. Not a broadsheet and not a TV station would touch it. The only person who touched it was the News of the World. And so they ended up publishing a single run front page in Scotland only in what I consider to be a national news issue. And only 5 years later did it get made into a national news issue.